Hi, my name's Phil. I like to come out politics. So, remember when Nigel Farage was boasting about how much of a champion of freedom of speech and the press he was in America recently? Oh, I take more questions from journalists than any other political leader, he said. Not remotely true, and he was called out over it. But shall we see what's really going on? Because Reform UK in Kent continue to implode, and their leader now seems to be avoiding questions from journalists, according to the local press. And before this spring, Reform had control of 0 councils. Now they have 2 councils that have basically banned journalism. Some freedom of speech for you there. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So after the embarrassment of Reform UK hiring out a venue for a victory celebration in Caerphilly, only to have no need for it at all last week, we're back onto the absolute clown car crash, which is Reform UK in local government. Reform leader in Kent's Lyndon Kemcaran had already been attacking the press. Ironic, as she was a journalist before becoming a Reform UK SS commander. Also a Tory, but that hardly needs saying. All of Farage's favourites are former Tories because Reform UK is just a rebranded Tory party. Earlier this month, before the leaked video of her abusing her own Reform UK colleagues, she was attacking journalists for reporting on their overhearing of discussions about raising council tax. This is not proper journalism, she complained. And yet we now have video evidence of her telling her own Reform colleagues that they will be raising council tax, and she thinks it will be a job well done if they don't have to raise it by the absolute maximum amount. Oh, and the latest is they think they will have to raise it by the maximum amount. This despite a clear election promise to lower, not raise council tax. Not that Kent are the only ones to do this, but they are the main council which Reform UK want to hold up as a model for how they can run a government. Ironic that it is pretty much the most dysfunctional one. I mean, in Cornwall, you've got 5 Reform councillors are now sitting as independents on the council. That includes the Reform leader and deputy leader. Reform UK in Worcestershire, they're wanting to raise council tax by 10% while still cutting services. In fact, Reform UK had a general pledge to cut council tax across all the councils they fought for, but are doing the opposite in council after council. Now, I wouldn't attack any council for raising council tax normally because they are starved of resources to deliver decent public services. I have a lot of sympathy for the plight faced by councils of all stripes, although it is the fault of the national Tory government, so less sympathy for the Tory councils. But Reform UK went into that election promising council tax cuts funded by cutting waste that they knew wasn't there. There hasn't been a sudden change of circumstances. In fact, Labour have actually boosted central grants by more than the Tories had planned to. So if anything, there's a bit of a windfall for some of the sorts of councils Reform have been winning in deprived areas. The reason I make a meal of this is Reform went into the election promising something that the national leadership at least knew was undeliverable. They've been used to carping from the sidelines for so long, where you get to propose completely unworkable policies as long as they sound plausible to people who don't understand it. Can do it with impunity because you'll never be put to the test. So they're just not set up for that situation where all of a sudden you are put to the test when you win power. Be interesting to see how their voters react when their seats come up for re-election. We've already seen one by-election where Reform UK lost their seat pretty much straight away, although they did retain another, so it's like a 1-1 draw, I think, so far. We're going to get another test soon as well. A Reform councillor in Durham who got drunk at an armed forces day and abused staff is going to resign, which will trigger a by-election. We'll see what happens there. As for Kent, Reform UK have now kicked out at least now 2 of the 4 suspended councillors being blamed for leaking the video, even though there's no proof. They're not even a year in and they're already fighting like rats in a sack. It's really not going well. Then yesterday I heard they kicked out another 2 councillors, and not the suspended ones, this is extra. And at least a dozen Reform UK councillors still haven't signed Kemcaran's oath of allegiance yet. Oh, which is a totally non-authoritarian thing to do. So 7 Reform councillors so far by my count have been booted out, and they're not even 6 months in. And it's not just like Reform UK councils have run into a dead end because they can't keep their promises. They've been not so much cutting waste, but actually increasing it. Beyond the internal drama, Reform UK's councils have become battlegrounds for culture wars, flagpoles, climate change policies taking centre stage. So in Leicestershire, reports emerged that the new Reform administration had banned the flying of the Pride flag, the Ukrainian flag, from council buildings, which of course fits the narrative of a party focused on a narrow definition of British values. After taking control, Reform called a special meeting to debate flag policy, because that's the key issue worrying voters struggling with crumbling public services and a cost of living crisis. Flags. Meanwhile, West Northamptonshire, the battle was over climate change. In July, the council's cabinet officially voted to scrap its net zero targets. The council leader argued that the authority can't afford net zero and that the targets were undeliverable. References to climate impact in reports were to be replaced with the softer environmental impact. The decision, of course, was met with fierce protests, and critics pointed out the hypocrisy of a council accepting millions in government green funding and then publicly abandoning its climate commitments. And as for not being able to afford net zero targets, a reminder, those targets lead to cheaper energy. Reform UK in this and other councils are wanting to maintain higher energy bills for their voters, knowing that the one issue which is helping power Reform UK right now, it's not their favourite subject of immigration. It's a suffocating cost of living crisis. Reform's attack on clean energy is born of two things. First, they're in hock to the fossil fuel industry. This summer, Richard Tice met with Russian donors and said he wanted the Russians to build our energy infrastructure. So if he gets his way, the Kremlin will have control of our energy once Reform have been in government for a few years. Second, they need people to have more expensive energy in order to keep the cost of living going. They know that they can screw over energy projects at local level, but the national government will take the blame. So keep those energy bills high to keep Reform flying high in the polls, then win power, sell our country out to Putin's oligarchs. One of Reform UK's central promises was to bring forensic financial security to council spending. This has led to its own set of controversies, of course. Nottinghamshire, that's the other one that's banned journalism. They did it first, actually. They were the trailblazers. So the Reform-led council there was criticised for a plan to spend £75,000 on new flag installations. Opposition councils have called it ridiculous, a clear contradiction of the party's pledge to cut wasteful spending. Now, the Reform leader defended the expense, claiming the money has come from efficiencies already found. It's like, well, hang on a minute, but it's still waste. So why don't you spend it on something useful if you've genuinely found some savings? But also it means that Reform-run Nottinghamshire County Council aren't cutting any public services then, doesn't it? I mean, if you can afford the flags and it's like, well, we've cut waste and now we've got all this extra money, so we might as well get some flags. Well, that means you're not going to cut any public services, does it? Also means you're not going to raise council tax, doesn't it? Because you don't need more money. You know, just like they promised. I mean, they say they can afford the flags. They don't try and claim it's not waste. They just try and claim that they can afford it because they did their job and cut waste, right? Should be interesting once their full spending plans are finalised. The council, which has already banned journalists from asking questions because even their top councillors are too feckless to answer. Let's just see what happens, because if they cut a single public services, which their voters would have preferred remain in place, maybe they should ask why they're having to do without, so that some lampposts can have flags on them. And the story of Reform UK in local government is pretty much cookie cutter at each council. Flags bad. Well, no, some flags good. Some flags so good that we should actually spend money putting more of them up and meetings debating them. But not the bad flags, they have to come down. Oh, and clean energy projects, which have to be providing growing returns for the UK economy, and they're providing good, well-paying jobs as well. I know they're bad too. We don't want anything that boosts the economy or lowers your energy bills. Much better that we give our money to foreign companies, not British-based ones. And it's worth the higher energy bills to know we're helping out Russian and American oil companies. They're having a tough time right now, you know. And no wonder they like to spend their time talking about flags and fossil fuels, because whenever they try to discuss anything else, like, oh, I don't know, the budget, they break out in fights. And council leaders either resign or ask Farage to kick out another group of Reform councillors for being rude to the Führer. What on earth is this shit show going to look like in another year or two? I mean, you do get dysfunction and scandals at all levels of government, and you do at local level. But they've only been in power for less than 6 months, and they're riding high. They can't even say they're under pressure. And they've only got 10 councils. Every day is another scandal or bout of infighting. At this rate, we won't need Labour to sharpen up their act to kick them out in future elections. If we give them long enough, Farage will have booted them all out of the party himself. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.